Good morning, everyone. My name is Jocelyn Franco. I'm a senior American Studies major here at Carleton, and as a current student of food writing, I am so pleased to be up here today introducing today's Convocation speaker, Soleil Ho. Soleil Ho entered the food industry after graduating from Grinnell College in 2009, where they first worked at an organic farm and then at restaurants as an executive chef. A self-described writer on the fish sauce beat, Soleil Ho is the restaurant critic for the San Francisco Chronicle. In that position, they have instituted a great number of changes, including informing readers up front that they were not going to use ethnic or authentic in restaurant reviews, and publicly discussing the ethics of reviewing, or not, restaurants whose chefs or owners are implicated in abuse in the era of Me Too. Soleil Ho is an active food, travel, and culture writer, as well as the host of podcasts Racist Sandwich, Popaganda, and Extra Spicy. In their work, they have written about the culinary legacy of Asian immigration in Mexico, the politics and practice of eating dogs, and the impact of assimilation food. Throughout their work, Soleil Ho has pushed for more diversity in food media, actively exploring stories that encompass the peoples whose foodways have been marginalized and undervalued for far too long. Also, they are the co-writer of Meal, a graphic novel on culinary mentorship, queer romance, and eating insects. Their work has been published in the anthologies Women on Food and the 2019 and 2021 editions of the Best American Food Writing. Ho is among a new wave of food critics, pushing back against the assumption that readers of food criticism are white, upper middle class, or wealthy. I mean, everyone eats. The title of their presentation today is called The New Wave of Food Criticism. Please join me in welcoming Soleil Ho to Carleton College.
Oh, I guess I should take this off. Hi, everybody. Thanks for showing up. I don't show up to anything these days, so I'm just like really psyched to see so many people here. I'm Soleil Ho. As Jocelyn alluded, I went to Grinnell College, so I've heard a lot about Carleton and how much better it was. No, I'm very nostalgic for snow, living in San Francisco, so I'm just really happy to be here, so thank you for having me. So I am a food critic. What does that mean? On the most reductive sense of the phrase and of the job title, I go to restaurants and I eat the food and I write about whether the food is good or bad, right? Like that is kind of our general understanding of what restaurant critics do. But that's not what I'm doing this for. Yes, it would be really easy to just do that for the next 30, 50 years of my life, but I wanted more out of it. I find food to be such a fascinating topic to write about because it is so diminished, because what you think of a restaurant critic as doing is not actually that exciting or intellectually rigorous. So I wanted to bring that to the profession. So yeah, I went to school, I went to work on an organic farm, I ended up working in restaurants, and all along the way I was writing. I was writing pieces about cultural appropriation. I was writing pieces about the food that they had at Disneyland and about colonialism and all these things that really excited me about just all the big ideas that you could extrapolate from the topic of what you eat. So right now at the Chronicle, I write maybe one review a week. I go to restaurants probably 6 days a week. I enjoy that very much. I always order the crab, I'll be honest. So what I do though, when I go into a restaurant, is I really think about what it aims to do. What is its purpose? What are they trying to tell us about what we want, right? And what it wants us to want. So what I mean by that is, for example, let's talk about a restaurant that I reviewed once, Le Colonial in San Francisco. It was or it is, still exists, it's a Vietnamese restaurant that opened in the 80s, early 90s, kind of at the time when a lot of these sort of romantic depictions of Indochina were kind of in vogue, right? There were movies that were coming out about French Indochina, about the colonial era of like the 1940s, 1950s, pre-war, right? And so this restaurant, owned by French people, was made to put the diner in the position of someone who was a French colonist. You were supposed to sort of bask in the tropical vibe. You were supposed to take the positionality of a colonist and enjoy the food and the service, like within that position, sort of like you're an actor. And so in that way, that restaurant was telling you that it was glamorous, that it was desirable, that it was a beautiful experience to be a colonizer. And I thought that was so interesting, right? And they also had really bad spring rolls. So I went to this place and I was like, okay, like how do we talk about this in a way that people will get, right? Because what is interesting about the built world around us is that they're not, the walls are not telling us anything. There's not like words written on the walls or in the glass panels or on the seats and on the wood. And yet they are telling us all these things just subconsciously on the level of what is unspoken. When a restaurant has pictures, like black and white kind of vintage pictures of various ethnic groups of Asian people unsmiling with their like ethnic attire, right? And you're just supposed to soak it in as a tourist, as an observer, what is that telling you about those people and about your relationship to those people? You know what I mean? And when their food, the food of these like ethnic groups, is being put on the menu for you to enjoy and indulge yourself in, that sends a message too, which is so interesting. And the food isn't, again, when the food isn't that good, it tells you something else about how that food is valued, how that culture is valued. You know what I mean? So that, to me, is like what is so exciting about writing reviews, is putting together the puzzle of everything in a space, from the food to the service to the music to just anything that is built and made to please you. Because you start to ask questions, right? Like if a restaurant is supposed to make me feel good, who am I? Who do they think I am, right? What do they think is pleasurable? And sometimes that means, a lot of places have a mission, right? Food is so fascinating because it encompasses so many values, not only just like the values of price, the most like transparent thing, but also it can transmit emotions, ideology, a mission almost. And it's not always like colonialism, right? That's not what I'm saying. Like for instance, like a Somali restaurant in Cedar Riverside in Minneapolis, like maybe their mission is to show people how beautiful their home country is. There's all kinds of agendas that happen in restaurants. And for me as a critic, figuring that out is the fun part. Bringing the context to the food and not just saying, I ordered, this pasta and it was too salty, because you can just go to Yelp for that. What else what else can I give you? And in that way, it's that higher level thinking about the sort of subconscious things that are happening as we go out to eat. So I started doing this because I was thinking, like, why am I like this? And I remembered being in college at Grinnell, and I was a history major, in my advisor's office, and just like weeping after one of our classes. And I'm not the kind of person who cries in front of people. And I was just so upset about the world. Just like what to do. For me, that was the big question in all capitals, like what can I do? Because everything just seems so screwed up, and I am just in this decadent position, taking classes, doing what felt like nothing. And she told me, Victoria Brown, a wonderful history professor and academic, and she told me that you clearly want to educate people. You want to talk about all these like huge ideas in your head, and you just like are having a lot of trouble articulating them. And I chewed on that for a few years. So as Jocelyn said, after I graduated from college, I went to work in restaurants, and I found myself surrounded by people who, were from all kinds of walks of life. People who hadn't graduated from middle school, people who used to be coal miners in Virginia, people who were just not really given much of a chance to really indulge their intellects, and also like people like me, who graduated from college and just didn't know what to do with themselves. And I realized, and this is like, Buddha coming off down the mountain here, but I realized that I still wanted to have these conversations, right? I still wanted to talk about bigger things, about ideology, about politics, about everything that was happening around us as far as discourse goes, about gender and race and like class consciousness. And they did too, but they were turned off by the way I was trained to talk in college. And I realized that the most ready metaphor for us to relate was the stuff right in front of us. It was food. And when you start to ask, you look at a dish, right, and you start to ask, like, why is this here? What has led to this cup of coffee being in front of me? What has led to Dole pineapple plantations taking over the state of Hawaii and overthrowing the monarchy there? What has led to all these, why are we, mainly black and brown people in this kitchen serving a mainly like white and wealthy dining room? What has led to this point? Why are we playing this kind of music? When you start asking, you just get so many interesting answers. And it's something that so many people can immediately relate to. But that wasn't always the case with food writing. And that was my main sense of frustration with the genre in general, was that it didn't cater to that perspective. It didn't acknowledge that that perspective even existed. For a long time, food journalism was sort of advertising for food companies and processed food companies, appliance sales, and it was often denigrated too as women's journalism. It was just sort of if you were a woman journalist at a newspaper, you weren't put on the politics beat or the crime beat or whatever you actually wanted to do, but food, gardening, home, lifestyle type stuff. And to this day, food publications are largely feminine. And they were denied a lot of their, if people had exciting stories they wanted to tell about food, they just didn't get the chance to, because no, you have to speak to this particular audience, right, of people who want to buy things, and that was sort of it. You don't want to alienate them, you don't want to freak them out, you don't want to introduce anything rough, textured, so that they, would have to not think, or they have to think. Because food for a long time was sort of an escapist topic. It was in America, and in the UK as well. It was the thing that you go to just for pleasure, right? Just to indulge, just to make sure that you can, and especially later on, just indulge in these really sort of semi-pornographic descriptions of the dishes that people were eating, and that was sort of the pleasure of it. So if you introduce some barbs, right, some history, some context, people don't like that. For one of the things that really woke me up to that was just reading, I'm Vietnamese, so reading people's reviews and writing about Vietnamese food was so fascinating, because they would write about, let's say, banh mi, which is the Vietnamese sandwich, and they would say things like, they would really try to acknowledge where banh mi came from, right? Bread is not indigenous to Vietnam, and if you ask why, it gets kind of awkward. So people would write oh yeah, Vietnam got bread as an exchange during French colonization, and that was it. And then they would go on about how yummy it was, right? And I thought, that is so weird. You can just say it. You can just say that European foodways were imposed on their colonies because, some people were often enslaved, right, to work in wheat fields so that colonizers could have the food they wanted. That's fine. It's not that hard, right? I just said it in 2 seconds. So that was the beginning, right, where I thought, okay, there's something really wrong with this genre. It's messed up. So I started my podcast, Racist Sandwich, in 2016, where I just my co-host, Zahir John Muhammad, and I just spent the whole stretch of the show, it's like 2 seasons, just having these conversations, talking frankly about race and class and gender and their intersections with food on every episode, because we just were so indignant that all of that stuff was so ignored in the genre as a whole. And we sort of wanted to shame the outlets by just saying, like, we can just do a whole show about this, you know? You don't have to just do it during, like, Black History Month or, like, Hanukkah. Like, you can talk about other people all the time and, like, respect them and acknowledge them, but yeah. And it really came to a head when Donald Trump was elected president in 2016, and a lot of these institutions like RIP, like Bon Appetit and Food and Wine and Savor put out statements about how immigrants, they love immigrants. Immigrants are great, they're cool. They make food good, and they're gonna commit to covering immigrants in their writing, which is, and we were like, oh, cool, that's nice. But what resulted was very indicative of the perception that food media in itself is very conservative. A lot of these publications brought in people of color to write and talk about their food, but in ways that were really shallow, in ways that asked people to just explain entire continents worth of food with generalizations, in ways that persisted in writing about the food that is here with the lens of a travel writer, as if you're going somewhere exotic and special. That still persisted. So it was tokenism, I guess. And I didn't become the food critic at the Chronicle until 2019. But at that point, I was like, all right, I'm fed up. Like, something's gotta happen, right? And I didn't think I would get the job because I had spent the past few years just like outright criticizing like all the outlets for everything they were doing. And I thought like, oh yeah, I'm just blacklisted, like whatever. I'm just gonna apply for this job as a joke. I'm here now, hi. And so since then, it's been so interesting because I get so much backlash for the work that I do, which I love. I love it. Probably a couple times a week, I get an angry email from someone who demands that I keep the politics out of food. Just like, where have you been the past few years? Like, I'm still doing it. I've been doing it. And as a sidebar, I really have come to appreciate backlash because that means someone was so affected by something that I did that they wanted to reach out. Like, you could have just ignored me, but you chose to like put me in your life, and I really appreciate that. But the other thing that I find really fulfilling is, people see me writing about, let's say, Burmese food or Punjabi food, and they get so excited, not just to be represented, because, being reflected is one thing, but to actually be respected, to actually have someone take their culture and cuisine seriously as a topic that is worth discussing at length, beyond just saying like, oh, here's a restaurant that is diverse, but more like engaging with it, really reading it, trying to analyze it and decipher it. Not to say that like, all food by immigrants is a puzzle, but more just saying like, I want to dig into it as like a fruitful topic in itself, So I wonder, like, last night I was looking at a lot of Ukraine news, as I'm sure a lot of you are. And I was thinking like, what am I doing here? What's going on, right? It's awful, terrible, and I just could not sleep because of it. And I thought, okay, what is the point of what I do in an environment that is so blatantly, right, being kind of encroached upon by fascism and like sort of fascist elements? What is the point of writing reviews of restaurants? Because it seems like the most silly thing. And I thought, the point for me in treating food like something, like a text that you can analyze, in teaching people how to read a restaurant, to how to identify the sort of subconscious ideologies and missions and motivations and values that are happening all around them, is so that they can apply that to everything else in their lives. You know, not just food, but the books you're reading, the films, just the news even, just making you a better media consumer. I think that if you can see the politics in food, which is, again, like something that has been very unfairly cast as an escapist pursuit, if you can see that the politics have always been there, that, you know, you're not introducing politics into food, you're actually exposing everything that is going underneath the surface. You can do that with everything else. And that, to me, I think is a very powerful antidote to the people and the ideologies that want you to just keep going and not thinking about anything. If I can just get people, the people who write me these angry emails, like if I can just like plant a seed in their heads, you know, that this is possible, that they can do this, even if they don't think they can or should themselves, then I feel like I've succeeded. And that way, like, what I do isn't really food criticism. You know, it's kind of subversive in its own way, and I hate to like toot my own horn, but I do think that that is the point of what I do. It's just really messing with the genre so that people can learn to think better. I think that's all I have to say. Now we're taking questions.
Yes, now we're taking questions. But before we take the questions, I just wanted to mention this is the last convocation for this term. We'll be back in spring term, but this is the last one for this term, so excellent way to end it. We are full up at the post-convocation luncheon, so if you've RSVP'd, we're going to be at the Great Hall, not AGH today. And if you haven't RSVP'd, there's always next term. But in the meantime, if we have any questions for Soleil, now is the time. And I see one right here.
I'm also taking recommendations for where to go for breakfast.
How do you go about choosing which restaurants to visit to write reviews?
Good question. I have a list. I have a very long list of places based on reader recommendations. I am also on Yelp constantly, just like seeing what is new, because they're a good aggregator for openings. Really, I go to a lot of places that I don't write about ever, but I go in and just try to get a sense, like, is there something here? Which is so not helpful, I'm sorry. But you go into a space, right, and you're just like, oh, there's energy, there's something, which is so Californian also. You know, there's like a vibe that I pick up, and then I want to articulate that vibe.
Have you been to any restaurants since you've been in this area or Minneapolis, and what did you think of them?
I got in last night, kind of late, and there was a Taco Bell. I went to Taco Bell. And I texted my friend a picture of the Crunchwrap Supreme that I got. And I said, hey, look, I got some Indian food. Because a lot of Indian American Desis like really like Taco Bell. And so it was a joke, but anyway. Why did I tell you that? Don't cancel me.
Hi, how do you go about writing or like doing a review on a restaurant that's like from your background or your community, and like being truthful of like the critiques, but then also like, obviously you want to highlight the good, obviously, but like, yeah, how do you balance out the criticism versus like the analysis that you do of like, oh, maybe they did this out of, you know, maybe there's a gentrified community and it's like, oh, well, yeah, they did this out of this. Yeah.
You talk about all of it, you know. I'm weird, like, I shouldn't be, but I'm very, like, honest in my reviews about, like, my thought process. If I have anxiety about it, like, let's say I'm going to a Vietnamese restaurant and I feel like, you know, I don't know this food and that makes me feel like really messed up, like as a person, you know, I'll say that and just think like, wow, this is like such an opportunity to learn more about my culture. And also like get into conversations, right, about how the food from people of my background is often cast as cheap, and like, you know, how much should a banh mi be or a bowl of pho be, and like, let's have that conversation. I kind of go for the everything all at once approach. My reviews are long.
Thank you for coming. If you want brunch tomorrow, you should go to the Oli store.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. I'm wondering, what's an example of a restaurant that you think has done it really well? Like, you talk a lot about unpacking restaurants, and what's one that you're like, okay, this is a good message, and how do you communicate that in your review?
You know, I haven't written about it, but Owamni in Minneapolis, St. Paul, in the Twin Cities, is really interesting, right? It's a recently opened restaurant by the chef Sean Sherman, and it is all about just indigenous foodways and like really bringing like pre-colonial food out and like showcasing like, okay, like how do you exist as an indigenous chef and like human, right, within like a sort of westernized society. And the food's like amazing. And, like he just checks all the boxes. It's just really great. And then there's Union Kitchen, I think in St. Paul, is it? By a Hmong chef, Yia Vang, who does similar work, where you're just like, this is food that hasn't really been showcased, but in a way that still maintains the humanity of people, right? Doesn't exploit the culture as a sort of like touristy thing, but treats it respectfully.
Hi, thank you so much for being here today. I was wondering if you could talk about like how much outside research do you do for a typical review? Yeah.
A lot. I would say my writing process is like 12 hours of internet and talking to people, and then like 4 hours of writing. Really, like if I'm going to review a place that has food that I'm not super familiar with, I will talk to cookbook authors who've covered that food. I'll talk to other food writers or just like friends that I know who are of those backgrounds, just to get a sense of what I should be expecting. And then, or I'll take them to the restaurant. I mean, pre-pandemic times, I would have taken them to restaurants. I mostly go by myself now. And there are other things too, like I got asked to write a piece about a restaurant that denied service to armed police officers because they didn't want guns in the restaurant. And I did a ton of research before I wrote a single word on that, because there's been so much great work done about like, you know, sort of like anti-carceral politics and about, you know, police dynamics and just all of this big stuff, and I didn't want to screw that up. So, you know, it depends on the topic, but for the sort of headier stuff, I definitely do a lot of reading.
Hi. So I'm just thinking back to the example you gave of the Vietnamese restaurant from the beginning, and I'm wondering, in writing about and almost like exposing the whole story behind a restaurant and like the colonial roots, and are you trying to almost like boycott? Like, is that like an attempt to like, you know, expose, or is it an attempt to educate, or is it both?
I mean, I would never call for a boycott unless someone was being choked out, you know, in the restaurant or, you know, something like that. More educating, you know, and people will just do whatever they want to do with that information. I think the interesting part for me is just showing people what's going on. I mean, that is news, right? You just show people like, oh, what's happening here? What's happening there? And then they are free to interpret however they want. So yeah, like on a principle though, like I would say as many people wrote in to me to say that they're gonna go to that restaurant than not after I published that. So that's kind of how it works.
Hello. So you mentioned at the beginning of your talk that you didn't see much of a focus on how food was being talked about, I guess, in the way that you do it. I was wondering if you feel like you've had an impact on the industry or on the newspaper you write for.
You know, it's hard to gauge. I think I've had some impact. Certainly, I think I've empowered other critics to do the same kind of work. And we've shown that we can do that and not completely fold or burst into flames. that it's safe here too. So I hope that, I mean, I've heard from so many other writers that they felt supported in that, and just like reading my work, which again, like makes me cringe to say, but yeah, I think so.
Hi, I'm kind of curious about, you said that you come into, before writing a review with a lot of research. Do you kind of let that research inform the culture of the food, or do you kind of let the food inform the culture?
I think it's both ways. It's mutual. The late movie critic Roger Ebert, I think about his philosophy a lot, where he would, if he was going to review The Godfather and then review A Bug's Life, he wasn't going to keep them to the same sort of, rubric. He was going to think about what each one wanted to do and then judge them based on how well they fulfilled that mission. So, knowing something, right, about how, like, Burmese curry is supposed to be would be helpful as like a sort of starting point. Because, just to be specific about what I'm talking about, Burmese curries tend to have like a separation of the oil and the curry part. And so if you were to judge it based on that and say like, oh, it's like separated, that's gross, like according to a sort of like French way of thinking about how things are supposed to emulsify, then you're just wrong, like they're succeeding. You're just being ignorant.
I'm going to jump in with a question. You mentioned the movie A Bug's Life, so I could have sworn I read something about eating insects at some point.
Great pivot.
Okay. Have you ever? Is it a growing trend, and what is the tastiest?
Oh, yeah. So I have a very personal interest in edible insects. I co-wrote this book called Meal with a Minneapolis illustrator named Blue Delaquanti. It's in stores now. And we were just so excited about the idea of eating insects, but also like the politics and the confusion around the principle. Because you hear a lot about how, and I'm just going to talk for like 10 minutes about this, but you hear a lot about how like edible insects are the future of food, right? Like that in the future we're all going to be eating bugs and cricket powder and all this nonsense. And a lot of companies in the West jumped on that as an idea, like, oh, we're going to make so much money if you invest in crickets. And so they're like selling like these cricket bars and like these paleo like worm powders and things like that for like lots of money, lots and lots of money, selling directly to techies, Westerners with money. And so, if you're basing this off of the idea that like food is like insects are going to be the future of food because we're all going to be like, running out of beef, like why are you only selling it to rich people? That doesn't make any sense. And also, right, like there are the advocates who really boost how nutritious and like, again, sustainable insects are. And that, to us, was the reason why nobody in the West eats bugs, because it doesn't make any, like, why would you eat something just based on how, good it is for the environment? Nobody talks about how delicious they are. And so we wanted to do that. Bugs are delicious. I love them. Yummy. I have eaten mealworms and like flying ants and termites and wasp larvae and hornets. Those murder hornets, they're edible, they're delicious. And yeah, I'm a big fan because why close off an entire kingdom, essentially, of food when it's out there? I mean, I'm not gonna eat people, but like insects though, I think have so much terroir to them. They taste of the place that they that they live. They're just so wonderful. I went to this like village in Japan once, Kushihara, for which I recorded an audio segment for The Splendid Table, to their edible wasp festival, just to get a sense of like, okay, what is it like to be in a place where eating insects is like celebrated? It's like a party. People go to this festival to weigh the wasp nests that they grow in their backyards, and like they have a contest. It's awesome. And wasp larvae just taste so good. Oh man, I'm just remembering it. They taste like honey, even though they don't make honey. They eat meat. It's weird. But yeah, it's endlessly fascinating. There are no bug restaurants yet in the West. I hope there will be one so I can review it.
I was just wondering how much like sustainability and sourcing of ingredients comes up like in your general scope of restaurants and in your writing.
Oh, constantly. I mean, I'm in the Bay Area. Like, you can't not talk about it. And it's an interesting thing, right? Because we talk a lot about sourcing, about farm to table and all of that stuff. And I think the really interesting conversation is like, what is the utility of that actually, beyond getting really good citrus? Does eating local actually help? Who are you supporting when you're buying locally from the farmer's market? I think there's a lot of questions out there that still haven't really been answered. Yeah, hope to work on that soon though. I think it's so interesting. I mean, when you go out for sushi, right? Like, who among us is brave enough to ask for sustainable fish? I think we have a lot of way to go on that, I think.
I'm curious, you talk a little bit about sustainability, and you alluded to running out of beef. I'm curious what your thoughts on lab-grown meat are.
Oh, it's nasty. I've eaten a lot of it. I can't decide if it's better or worse than the hard seltzer tasting I had to do, where I had like 35 flavors all at once. Oh, it was awful. But lab-grown meat doesn't taste like a place, and for me, on a taste level, right? Like, there are some things like with certain animals, like insects, right? You can taste where they've been. It sounds gross, sorry. But to me, that's really interesting. Like wine, right? You can taste the environment. You can taste like whether they grew in a place that was really dry or really wet. With lab-grown meat, it's just sort of blank, and it's not scalable. I think, coming from the Bay Area too, you're surrounded by sort of tech solutions to normal problems, and really the solution is to eat less meat. You don't need to grow more. Just eat more beans. Love beans. Beans are great. So it is just another example, like the sort of cricket powder corporations of just hammers looking for nails,
This is a bit of a non sequitur, but I'm wondering, you mentioned you wrote a graphic novel, and I'm wondering what doing that kind of creative writing was like as opposed to writing food reviews, and how you found yourself working in that medium.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I'm a comic nerd. I love that stuff. And it's a long story, but essentially the illustrator for that graphic novel used to live in my apartment at different times, and so we connected based on that. And then they were like, hey, you want to write this with me? And I was like, sure, let's do it. It's like writing a screenplay, which is very interesting. Like, when you play with format, like as a writer, as a journalist, like it's very rare to be able to do that. And that's one of the things that I like to do in my position. Like, I wrote a review as a screenplay once, and that was very exciting and fun. Yeah, just like creatively, it's very refreshing. It's very neat.
So 2 quick questions. I also am a comic fan, so what's your favorite comic? And then the second question is there a review that you've written that you're like, looking back on it, said, I completely got that wrong? And what would you have done sort of different with that review?
Okay, first question. My favorite comic is a manga called Goodnight Pun Pun. Incredible. So messed up, though. A review that I've gotten wrong. That's a good question. I hate to say it. I don't think I've missed yet. I really, I agonize when I write stuff. Like, the night before I publish something, I do not sleep, because I just am so invested in getting it right. Because, making food, like making anything, like any craft, is so personal. You don't want to screw that up for someone, because it's so disrespectful. And, especially during the pandemic, right? Like, people out there were suffering to make food for people and deliver food for people. And I got to sit in my home office and write, I didn't want to waste that and let that cloud my judgment.
I could imagine with your work you see a lot of ways that people are using food really beautifully and a lot of ways that things are kind of a disaster. Do you feel optimistic about the future of the food system?
I'm a millennial. That's the first answer. I do not feel optimistic generally. But I will say one of the really incredible silver linings of the pandemic, which has been awful, obviously, though, was that it really gave the restaurant world a wake-up call as far as labor consciousness goes. People were fed up. They didn't want to make $12 an hour serving people who thought they were scum, and as a result, they left. They left the industry and or became permanently disabled because they got COVID. And now what we're seeing in restaurants is unions, which would have been like unspeakable just even 3 years ago. And you're seeing more like worker-owned restaurants, worker-owned like co-ops and that sort of thing. And I think that will only help as things potentially get more unstable in the future.
Thanks for your talk. You talked a little bit about Yelp, and I'm wondering how you think with the rise of like review forums like that, how has that changed like the food writing system?
Yeah, it's one of those things where I get asked that a lot. It's just like, why, like, what's the point of food criticism when we have Yelp? And it really clarified my ethics as a critic, because when you read a Yelp review, right, you don't know if the person writing those things got the meal for free. You don't know if they're friends of the owner. You don't know if they just had a really bad day and they're cranky. A food critic, all we have is our ethics. I go to a restaurant at least 3 times before I write a review, like a full-on review. I make sure if they try to send me something, I like pay for it. I don't have any friends in the industry, all of that sort of stuff. I'm very strict. I spend so much mental energy making sure that everything is, above the fold. That's not what you're gonna get with online reviews. But also, when people tell me, I don't wanna read about this, I don't wanna read about war or, all this other stuff in your reviews, I can just tell them, go to Yelp then. It's there. It's there for you, waiting.
I'm just curious, with your reviews, do you have a preference for reviewing like a really fancy restaurant versus a casual, cheaper place? Or like what differs between doing reviews for different types of restaurants in that way, like specifically relating to the price point that they have?
Oh, I do them all. I think a lot about how the former New York Times food critic Ruth Reichel used to keep a picture, just like a magazine cutout picture of a sort of normal working class couple in her desk, as a reminder that everyone goes out at some point. Everyone will go to a restaurant, whether it's like frequently, if you're like a millionaire, or just once in a while to celebrate something special, and they all matter. Fancy restaurants aren't only for fancy people. People will save up money, and so like as a critic, it's your job to make sure they're not wasting their money and being grifted on this one day that they've saved so much money to have, right? So I include it all. I don't know about preference at this point. To me, like all restaurants are just books that I want to read. They're so interesting. I would say though, on a practical level, I prefer the smaller scale mom and pops because they don't care about me as much. It's not as awkward, especially in California. You have to show your vaccine card to eat inside, and I can't hide with that anymore. Used to be I would just like make a reservation under a fake name, but now it's just they know who I am. So with the smaller spots, they're just like, okay, whatever. But the bigger, like, fancier places will have like pictures of all the critics like in the kitchen. They'll have like kind of bounties on our heads and just like be really overwhelming. So just on a personal level, I don't love that.
In your opinion, what is sort of the line between like cultural sharing and cultural appropriation when it comes to food? Like what are the ethics of someone making and selling food that is not from their culture?
Yeah, no, that's a complicated question. And I would say it all comes down to money, right? Like, where's the money going? Are you adding something to the culture, or are you just taking from the culture? You know, like as far as resources, as far as respect, as far as bringing up people who have like a real stake in what you're doing. If you're just extracting, then, you know, that's appropriation. That is like the definition of the word. Yeah, I think that's kind of, appropriation is sort of a way to describe a greater kind of system of extraction, you know, like that in itself, like you at home making, like, I don't know, something that is not from your background, like, yeah, it's appropriation, but like it doesn't really matter that much, you know, you're not committing a grave sin by any means.
So actually dovetailing off of that question, I was thinking about the original audience, it seems like, in like the comment section on your newspaper's website, seems to think the audience for food criticism is the people who are potential customers. Mm-hmm. But when you're writing about things, you're also, you know, the owners are going to read this and the people working there. And I'm wondering how you, I guess two things. One, how you would like them to, if you're writing about, you know, a restaurant that is colonial themed, how you want them to think about, like, are you hoping that they feel some shame or anything along those lines? Or, and also how they tend to respond to what you write. Do they, you know, do you get angry letters from the owners? Do you get appreciative, thoughtful letters from the owners or the workers there or anything along those lines? I mean, obviously there's some times when, you know, the chefs are physically abusive and you're writing about that and you want them to not do that anymore. But, you know, more broadly, like, you know, say non-criminal or non-legal sorts of things that people are doing.
Yeah, okay. What do I want them to feel? Well, I mean, I think the big part is, like, I hope that they feel seen, you know? But on the other hand, I think it kind of falls into this idea, right, that, like, you can just make art. Like, art should just be art, and I don't believe that. You know, I don't believe there are geniuses out there who just produce things outside of politics and outside of their contexts. Everything has meaning, everything has intention, whether it's openly acknowledged or not. So what I hope is that owners and restaurateurs who do this sort of stuff, who like make, you know, like weird jokes about slavery in their restaurant decor, like, see that this isn't just art. Like, you're not just making art, you're doing something. You're like making a statement. At the very least, I hope they wake up to that, because that's the truth. But largely, I think people are grateful to be respected enough to be analyzed, which is lovely to hear. I don't read the comments, though. I don't know what they say there. I choose peace.
Hi, thanks for coming. I was wondering how you decide what to order when you go to a restaurant.
Oh, sure. I don't only order the crab. I get the most interesting thing, like something I've never seen before, and then I get the most common thing, if that makes sense. Like, I'll get something that seems like a special or something experimental, and then I'll get like the Caesar salad, because one, like, it's cool to see a kitchen like really pull out all the stops on things that they think are special, but also, you know, I think it's really revealing to see how they treat something that is boring. Like, is it still good? Does it still maintain like a level of quality? That tells me a lot. I always get the vegetarian things too, because again, like, if they're just treated like, you know, a thing for the veggies, then that's also something.
Do you think studying history in college influenced the way that you write about food?
Oh yeah, definitely. Do you ever see the movie Arrival with Amy Adams? It's a tangent. But so in that movie, she encounters these aliens, right? And she's trying to understand what they're saying. And she comes to this realization that the aliens see all of time compressed into like the same moment, the future and the past and everything. And for me, that is the history major, where like you cannot help but see everything that has led to this moment, right? In like historical events. And so yes, I apply that lens to food and restaurants as well. Just how could you not see the context when you know the history, you know? And so like that's the goal, is to help people see that as well. You should see it though, it's really good.
All right, am I missing anybody's hands?
Back there.
Right there. Oh.
Hi, I'm just wondering how you think your sense of taste and smell has changed throughout your food critic career.
I don't think it has that much. Owing to my time as a chef, I developed a really good palate. And I can, by tasting things, right, I can suss out the process and suss out the ingredients for the most part. Yeah, just, it's been good. Hopefully I don't get COVID and lose all that, but yeah.
Yeah, you kind of mentioned how food of certain culture, like banh mi, can't be priced at a certain point, but once they're often considered like gentrified or gentrifying. I would just love to hear more about your thoughts on like cultural food that can enter like kind of dominated like culinary world.
Yeah, no, that's like a really interesting debate, right? Like when you go to a taqueria that has, you know, organic chicken and, I don't know, local cheese, it has a vibe, right? You're just like, oh, like, is this gentrified? Like, what's going on here? When you step into a restaurant, there are signals that you pick up on, like, oh, this is like authentic, which is a word I don't use, but like, you know, you kind of get that sense, like, oh, this is like a place for the people. Versus this is like a gentrified place. And yeah, there are certain like aesthetic cues that speak to that. I will also say though, the other side of it is that this is a very diasporic conversation, right? Like if we were not immigrants and descendants of immigrants who are living in a culture where we were not the majority, it would be a totally different conversation, right? Like back in like China, right? Like there are high-end restaurants and there are the more like low-end restaurants. They all exist and they are all Chinese. Here it's a lot more contested. It's a lot more political. And there's a lot of angst too, because you know a lot of immigrants enter this country with not a lot of money, and so they feel priced out at restaurants that are, you know, often opened by second-generation immigrants or third-generation who are expressing what they want to express. I would say, you know, we can be bougie too. We contain multitudes, bougie and, you know, working class and working class bougie as a variant. I think we're not at the point yet where there are sophisticated conversations happening about the class dynamics within immigrant communities. There should be and could be, and I hope we get there. I think critics also have a really interesting role in terms of gentrification and who they choose to uplift and where. But I think there's a lot that's like inconclusive, I think, about like what broadly people think. Because we're not just individuals, right? We affect behavior. Like if I write about a barbecue place, people are going to go and they're going to line up for 2 hours to go to this place. I have a material impact on that neighborhood and on the people in that neighborhood. And I guess I can just say I don't take that lightly, and I think about it all the time when I am choosing how to write about a place.
All right, we have time for one more question if we've... No? Wow. Okay, well, thank you very much for coming. Thank you, Soleil, for being here. Thank you all for coming. And we'll see you in spring term.